Well, surprise, surprise. Dr. Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Health was funding research to identify treatments for monkeypox before the virus started making headlines. This is according to investigative reporter Natalie Winters over at the National Pulse. The nearly $10 million grant funds support a clinical trial that worked to identify effective treatments. The trial began in September of 2020 and has so far not generated any public studies, papers, or patents. That's according to the report.
The monkeypox grant summary states that the similarity between monkeypox and the smallpox virus, coupled with concerns about smallpox as a potential bioterrorism agent, have placed monkeypox treatments at the forefront of public health. And then there's this. The grant was distributed to Lori Dodd, who also works at the NIAID and was previously exposed for her involvement in the agency's reported data altering of remdesivir trials to make it seem more effective against COVID.
Oh.
Okay, Kim, this is your area of expertise. Help me understand this connection here. Is the implication that because they were working on a vaccine to monkeypox, that they somehow anticipated this? What's the angle here?
Well, I mean, look, that is obviously what a lot of people are going to be raising their eyebrows about and wondering. I mean, if they started this sort of research in September of 2020, right before COVID, and then suddenly, as the world is starting to just move on from COVID emotionally, I know COVID is still out there. A lot of people are still catching it. I recently had it. But nonetheless, people are emotionally saying, okay, 2 weeks turned into 2 years. I'm not going longer than that. And it just, happens that suddenly monkeypox now starts to make the rounds. And it's making press and, it's all over the news. Now, it's one thing to question, is it out there and visible and they're kind of scaremongering us about monkeypox, because they certainly are. Is that because of this? So it's the question of, is the media doing that, or is the government doing it, right? So is it Anthony Fauci doing it, or is it the media that's just looking for sensational headlines? Yeah, or is it both in cahoots?
It does certainly seem like there's an appetite for monkeypox that might not exist outside of COVID. But of course, there have been a number of scares, avian flu. There were a bunch of these things that didn't really amount to as much as people thought they were going to amount to, that, became news because newspapers and people like to consume these things. And there is a way that monkeypox, the name of it and the similarity to smallpox, does really tickle the imagination. But I think it's also true that, these institutes of health work on vaccines and treatments in advance of outbreaks happening. That's, kind of why we were able to ramp up the vaccine for COVID as quickly as they did, because they were already in development for other similar kinds of viruses and flus, and these people are working on these kinds of things all the time. So I'm not sure that we have the smoking gun yet to draw any conclusions about that. But this connection with the woman who also worked at the agency involved with remdesivir, is that also just a feature of a small scientific community where people are working on a lot of different projects, especially in the realm of virology?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible, right? It could just be coincidental if you believe in coincidences like this, right? But I will say that there is something very suspect about the fact that they started working on identifying treatments for monkeypox in September of 2020. This has been a virus that's been around since 1970. So why suddenly in September of 2020 are they saying, hey, we need to start looking for treatments for a disease that's been out there and circulating in certain parts of the world without it being that dangerous, actually? I don't think monkeypox is a deadly disease. I think it's just ugly. It's like chickenpox, right? So I'm sure there are maybe some people with very vulnerable systems that maybe do succumb to the virus. But overall, I think it's just inconvenient and ugly. But it is suspect. Why would they suddenly start working on it in September of 2020? And then suddenly, as soon as COVID is starting to tamp down, then they're saying, oh my gosh, there's a monkeypox and we've ordered how many millions of vaccines for this, and we need to get this out there, even though it's currently only spreading in one demographic at the moment, I believe. It's not, it's not easy to catch. You have to touch the source to catch it. So you have to be in close contact. So, it's suspect. I mean, let's face it. If this disease has been around for decades, why now?
Well, it could be, devil's advocate, it could be that in 2020, there's a lot more funding going the way of investigating these kind of contagious viruses because of the scourge of COVID-19. So it's very possible that, these grant processes are difficult. People are all constantly applying to get money to fund different kinds of research. And it could have been considered to be a low priority for the reasons you articulated. It doesn't seem to be spreading as quickly. It's not that prevalent in the world, generally speaking. But in a world where everyone's certainly concerned about viruses because of COVID-19, maybe the money simply started to flow in the fall of 2020.
I don't know. It's hard to believe. It seems like everything at that point in September of 2020 was flowing towards COVID. For them to suddenly say, oh, maybe we should tackle monkeypox, a virus that's been around since 1970, is really odd. But what's more odd is not that they started to investigate that. That would have been fine. What's odd is that there's now suddenly an outbreak, and that outbreak is making headlines, and it's spreading all around the world. And now everybody needs to be fear-mongered about monkeypox. So it does feel, like, many of the conspiracy theorists have been right up to this point about a lot of different things. So it does feel very odd that suddenly there's this there was this investigation into treatments for a disease that has been around for decades, starting in September of 2020, and then just conveniently, when everybody's starting to say, I'm not going to take any more boosters of this COVID vaccine, I got COVID anyway. So everybody's moving on with their life, and then suddenly they're like, oh, but we got this new really ugly disease because COVID wasn't scary enough for you, right? So now we got something that's really scary. It's going to give you boils on your skin. You don't want to walk around looking like that. So now suddenly the people that didn't want to get vaccinated against COVID are going to be like, sign me up. I don't want to have ugly sores all over me like chicken pox.
Do you think people would be responding to COVID differently and having a kind of a different approach to vaccines and mandates and masking if COVID did give you these kind of physical effects as opposed to just the respiratory effects, some of which are longer term?
I mean, hard to say. Many of us had chicken pox. So, we got through it, and I've got, a scar or two to prove it, right? So I don't know. I mean, if it's still not a deadly disease like monkeypox and chicken pox, and, smallpox is different, obviously. That was very deadly. But chicken pox, and parents had parties and threw their kids together as soon as they found out one had chicken pox. They'd be like, everybody get it right now, let's do this. So I don't know, or people would say, I think a lot of people would have still said, I'll just put up with the sores. I'm an adult, I won't scratch them so I won't get a scar. I'll just try to treat them. And it's better than trying out this experimental vaccine that we just don't have enough data on. I still think there would be a lot of hesitation, maybe a little less. Maybe some people would be like, I don't know, that's pretty ugly.
Some of those pictures look kind of gruesome. They look kind of worse than chicken pox. So.
Yeah, it's definitely disgusting. But as a kid, I had the mumps, the measles. No, I don't know if I had. Yeah, I think I had all three. I think I had chicken pox, mumps, and measles. I got the smorgasbord.
Well,
but that
maybe,
was back.
Yeah. Maybe I'm overestimating American vanity, but we'll see. Hopefully we won't see, and we won't have a widespread of this particular virus, but it's an interesting story to follow for sure. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.